Everybody. My name is Dave Johnson. I'm the major here at CMPD over the Special Operations Bureau, which includes the Transportation Division. I'm here today to discuss a nationwide phenomenon that certainly Charlotte and the Charlotte area has not been immune to, specifically incidents of aggressive driving and reckless driving in conjunction with street takeovers. More than just a nuisance or an annoyance, this type of activity is dangerous, and those who organize it and participate in it have zero regard for public safety or the laws put in place to ensure that safety. CMPD takes this type of lawlessness seriously and is leveraging resources at our disposal to address it. Just this past weekend, there were hundreds of drivers divided into different groups across the city involved in pop-up street takeovers and reckless and aggressive driving events across the city of Charlotte in various divisions. These pop-up incidents happened between Friday night, February the 24th, into the early morning hours of Sunday, February 26th. The locations span several divisions, including Metro Division, Westover, Independence Division, Freedom, Eastway, and Central Divisions. The vast majority of these incidents happen at night when visibility is low, and some occur in highly populated areas such as downtown and Central Division, which only adds to the dangerous level of these activities. CMPD's Transportation Division, along with the helicopter unit and patrol officers from a number of divisions, mobilized and responded to these areas, conducting traffic stops and taking enforcement action that included citations, arrests, seizures, and vehicles towed as evidence. CMPD is aware of witness cell phone video from some vehicles doing burnouts at around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning near the NASCAR Hall of Fame building. Central Division Crime Reduction Unit officers did respond to that scene. They dispersed that crowd and investigated a minor hit-and-run accident involving a light pole. This incident is under investigation with charges pending. However, it was a relatively minor incident compared to other locations across the city where we literally had hundreds of vehicles gathering to take place in this very dangerous activity. The community has asked, what is CMPD doing to hold those accountable for their actions in these street takeover incidents? Well, just in the past month, CMPD has ramped up its targeted enforcement of this activity. Officers have written 54 citations in relation to this type of activity. We've made 5 arrests, and we have towed, seized, or taken into custody as evidence 12 separate vehicles. Now, these 12 vehicles represent a major jump in enforcement, with the majority of these coming in just the past few weeks as we've seen this activity escalate. There are, however, some major challenges when it comes to enforcement actions, particularly in identifying the drivers of these cars, as many of the drivers of these cars are not the registered owners of these cars, and nor do many of these cars have the properly affixed license plate that is supposed to be on these cars. So it makes it a challenge to identify who's driving these cars and who owns these cars. These drivers also, some of them rarely, if ever, stop for police officers. CMPD's pursuit policy, which is in place to put some guardrails up and to help mitigate harm to the citizens of the public and of Charlotte, only permits officers to pursue for crimes dangerous to life. And these street takeovers and burnouts do not rise to the level of crime in which CMPD officers are authorized to pursue. We're looking forward to working with City Council and the state legislature to draft and enact local ordinances and state statutes that hopefully will assist us in adding some teeth to the enforcement resources that we already have at our disposal. CMPD will continue to target these dangerous incidents and hold those responsible accountable. Thank you, and I'll take some questions in regard to this.
Major, you mentioned the enforcement and trying to stop these takeovers. Has there been the thought of just placing officers in these problem areas, or is it always after someone calls 911?
So, I mentioned earlier, literally hundreds of cars in different groups spread out across the city, and it's different locations every weekend. So there are some locations that are repeat locations, but they may go back to that in consecutive weeks, or they may not. So really, it's we're driven by what we see and what we know, and we also have constraints of just not being able to be everywhere at once, right? So in instances where we have an idea where they're going to be, we'll be proactive. When they pop up in places that we weren't expecting them, we respond, and we have a protocol that we follow when we respond to try to maximize our enforcement efforts.
I guess with this recent one that we have all seen the video from, I mean, that's minutes from here, which is kind of rogue for these drivers to think they don't care that police is minutes away. So that's what I'm saying. Is there a reason why, police are not, specifically when we talk about the uptown, I mean, it's walking distance from here. It
is. I mean, it just goes to show you the lawlessness and the kind of rogue attitude that's involved in this type of activity, which is why it's very important to us and very important to the public, and why we're here today.
As a point of view education, I know this, a few of us know this, but just to point out here, people probably see that graph and say, oh, only 5 arrests for everything that's happened, but they don't necessarily note the 54 citations that's also been happening.
Correct.
Too. This goes to the wall the way it currently is. Reckless driving is a citation, and these people are probably what are they being arrested for if they are getting arrested? So
we're encountering drugs and guns, in the stuff that we can arrest for. I know at least one of those arrests is for felony fleeing to elude. So if somebody doesn't stop and we are able to catch them later, we can charge them with the felony and seize their vehicle. So that's what some of those arrests are for.
But as far as the citations, it's specifically for the fact that, I mean, these street takeovers were going on. Reckless driving is a citable offense, not necessarily arrestable.
It's citable and arrestable. Yeah. But if, just for instance, if I have 20 officers working to target this and 10 of them make arrests, those 10 officers are now gone off the street for a number of hours processing those arrests. So we feel a more effective tactic is to issue that citation, give that person their day in court, and then we seize that vehicle as evidence until it's no longer needed for court purposes.
We know there's a bill being drafted right now in Raleigh. They talked about local ordinances. What have those conversations been like? And looking at a bill, what would you like it to have in it to give it some teeth?
We would love for it to be as stringent as possible. We know there are some jurisdictions across the country that have mandated high fines, $1,000 fines, 6-month seizure, automatic seizure of that vehicle if they're convicted. We would love to see something like that has an immediate effect.
Major, do you think writing a citation is an effective way to keep these people off the streets?
They will have to have their day in court, right? There are costs that are associated with receiving a citation, especially one for reckless driving. We hope that in conjunction with the possibility of losing access to their vehicle will have the proper teeth that we need, but we know that there's an uphill climb associated with that.
So then why don't you just arrest them? I know you said you don't want to take officers off the street, but...
In instances that are particularly egregious and we feel like it's necessary to take somebody to jail that night, we do. We certainly do. And we have that discretion to make that choice if we feel like it's appropriate. However, best use of resources, we're all operating with limited staffing and limited resources, and we don't want to use that as a crutch, but we need to be smart about how we manage those resources as well. Yes.
I can't help but notice, I live out on Tyler Road, and I actually hear a lot of street racing that actually happens there, especially on weekends, Friday, Saturday nights. It's a very common feature. It's like especially late at night. And a lot of these happen in such an instance where by the time you guys get the call, by the time a 911 call is made, this thing's already gone.
Correct.
So how many of these do you think you're actually missing out on the streets?
How many of what are we missing?
Street racing, street takeover incidents?
Folks are very freely and willingly calling 911 when they see this, and we want that to continue. Yeah. Now, somebody hearing a loud muffler racing down the street may not necessarily mean that it's one of these street takeover events, but we would certainly encourage folks to call 911 in regards to that as well.
Major, in terms of short staff,